I didn't notice it when it started. That's the part that still bothers me a little. You'd think something important would announce itself, that there'd be a clear before and after. Some moment you could rewind to and say, that's when things shifted. But nothing like that happened. If anything, everything looked normal, which is probably why it lasted as long as it did. I just remember realizing one day that I hadn't heard about her morning. And that sounds small, almost ridiculous when I say it out loud. But mornings used to be where everything began for us. She used to tell me things before they fully became stories. That's the only way I know how to explain it. Not updates, not summaries, fragments. She'd text me while brushing her teeth because she'd remembered something funny from a dream. She'd called during her commute just to complain about traffic or describe someone she saw at a coffee shop. Nothing important. That was the point. The things she told me didn't need to matter. They just needed somewhere to land. And for a long time, that place was me. We met through work, technically, though neither of us worked together directly. Same building, different floors. I first noticed her in the elevator because she apologized when she didn't need to. Someone bumped into her getting off, and she said sorry automatically. I remember thinking that said something about her. Not weakness, just awareness. A few weeks later, we ended up leaving at the same time. Rain outside. Everyone crowding near the entrance, pretending they might wait it out. She looked at the weather and laughed quietly. Guess we're walking anyway, she said. I said yeah. And somehow we kept walking together even after our routes split slightly. Conversation felt easy immediately. Not exciting exactly, just unforced. We talked about work schedules, bad coffee, how adulthood mostly feels like improvising competence. I didn't feel like I needed to perform. That stood out. Afterward, I realized I'd told her things I usually kept surface level with people I barely knew. Nothing dramatic, just honest details. And she listened in a way that made pauses feel safe instead of awkward. That's rare. You don't notice how rare until later. At the beginning, everything moved naturally. No defining moment where we decided to become something official. We just kept choosing each other again the next day. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into staying over. Eventually, there were spare clothes in drawers neither of us acknowledged placing there. She told me everything back then. That's not exaggeration. Her coworker saying something strange. A podcast episode she half-liked. A conversation with her sister. A random thought she had while grocery shopping. Sometimes she'd start a sentence and stop halfway because she realized it wasn't interesting. Then she'd tell me anyway. I don't even know why I'm telling you this, she'd say. And I'd say, no, keep going. Because I liked hearing how her mind moved through the world. It made me feel included in places I wasn't physically present. I think that's what intimacy actually is. Not sharing big events. Sharing awareness. When we moved in together, nothing dramatic changed, which felt reassuring at the time. We already knew each other's habits. She woke earlier than me. I stayed up later. She hummed absent-mindedly while cooking. I talked to myself when concentrating. Life blended smoothly. Too smoothly, maybe. But I didn't think that then. Evenings became predictable in comforting ways. Dinner. TV neither of us fully watched. Her occasionally turning toward me mid-episode to tell me something unrelated. Those interruptions mattered more than I realized. Because interruption means someone is thinking of you first. You become part of their internal dialogue. And for a long time I was. I don't know when the small things stopped coming first. That's the hardest part to trace. At some point, stories arrived later. She'd mentioned something that happened hours earlier. Oh yeah, my boss said something weird today. Today used to mean immediately. Now it meant some time before. I told myself it was normal. People get busy. Comfort replaces constant communication. That explanation worked for a while. Until I noticed I was learning about her life the way acquaintances do. After the fact. Summarized. Cleaned up. I remember sitting on the couch one night while she scrolled through her phone. We hadn't spoken much for an hour. Not tense silence. Just coexistence. And suddenly I realized she hadn't interrupted the evening once. No random thought. No unnecessary comment. Nothing small. I almost asked if everything was okay. But everything was okay. That made the question feel irrational. So I stayed quiet. The shift continued gently. She stopped texting during the day unless something logistical came up. Groceries. Timing. Plans. Practical communication replaced spontaneous sharing. And I adapted faster than I want to admit. I stopped sending small things too. Not consciously. You mirror emotional energy without deciding to. If someone stops opening doors, eventually you stop knocking. We still loved each other. I believe that. But love started operating efficiently. And efficiency removes curiosity. The realization came on an ordinary evening. She came home later than usual, set her bag down, changed clothes, started telling me about dinner with coworkers. Names I recognized, stories I didn't. Halfway through, she mentioned something funny that had happened earlier that morning. Everyone at work had laughed about it. She laughed again while telling me, and I felt something tighten quietly inside my chest. Because that story used to belong to me first. I used to hear things before the world did. Now I was catching up afterward. And the difference felt enormous, even though nothing dramatic had changed. I don't think she noticed. That's important. There was no intention behind it. Just reorientation. Her thoughts were landing elsewhere first. After that, I began noticing patterns. She'd text friends immediately, but tell me later. Share reactions online before mentioning them at home. Laugh at messages I hadn't seen. Her inner world was still active. I just wasn't its first audience anymore. I told myself this was maturity, independence, healthy space. But another thought kept returning. When someone stops telling you small things, it usually means you're no longer the person they think of automatically. An automatic thought is where closeness lives. I didn't confront her. How do you explain missing something so subtle? I miss hearing about your days sooner sounds childish. Needy. So I adjusted instead. We became calmer. Kinder even. Less friction. Less expectation. Which sounds positive. But something vital had already thinned. One night, I realized I'd had an entire stressful day without wanting to tell her about it. That scared me more than anything she'd done. Because it meant the change existed in me too. I had stopped reaching first. Stopped assuming she needed to know. We weren't withdrawing. We were redistributing attention. Slowly. Quietly. The conversation that ended things wasn't dramatic. She said she felt distant lately. Relief came before sadness. We talked carefully, neither blaming the other. No betrayal to reference. No moment to repair. Just awareness arriving late. We stayed kind to each other until the end. I'm grateful for that. Still, after she moved out, I kept waiting for devastation. Instead, there was recognition. The apartment felt almost identical. Because emotional separation had already happened long before physical distance. That realization took months to fully accept. I didn't miss arguments. Or routines. I missed being the place her thoughts arrived first. Sometimes now, something small happens. A strange interaction. A funny sign. A passing thought. And I feel that old instinct again. Tell someone. That impulse feels fragile now. Precious, almost. Because I understand what it means. It means someone occupies space inside your immediate awareness. And when that space shifts, nothing explodes. Life just reorganizes quietly. I don't think she stopped loving me suddenly. I think she stopped narrating her life toward me. And eventually, I did the same. That's how it ended. Not with silence exactly. Just fewer small things. Then almost none. And without those, everything else followed naturally. I still wonder sometimes when the last small thing happened. The last thought she shared before sharing it with anyone else. I don't remember noticing it then. Only afterward. Which feels fitting. Because most endings aren't recognized while they're happening. You understand them later. Slowly. Piece by piece. Until eventually there's nothing left to figure out. Just quiet understanding. And the memory of a time when someone told you everything first. Before the world did. Before distance felt normal. Before small things stopped arriving at all. I think what stayed with me the longest wasn't the breakup itself. It was how gradual the change had been. Because when something ends slowly, you don't really know when you're allowed to grieve it. There's no clean moment. No clear loss. Just awareness catching up to something that already happened. For a while after she left, I kept trying to remember the last time she told me something completely unnecessary. Not important news. Not plans. Just a thought. Something unfinished. I couldn't find it. Every memory near the end felt edited somehow. Practical. Efficient. Already processed before it reached me. And I realized that toward the end, I wasn't learning things alongside her anymore. I was receiving conclusions. In the beginning, she used to think out loud with me. That's what I missed most. She'd start explaining something before she fully understood how she felt about it. Change directions mid-sentence. Correct herself. Sometimes she'd say, "Wait, I don't think that's actually what I mean." And we'd figure it out together. Those conversations made me feel included in her becoming. Later, she seemed more certain when she spoke. More finished. Like emotional processing happened elsewhere. I didn't notice when I stopped being part of that process. Only that eventually, I was hearing results instead of thoughts. And results don't create intimacy. Uncertainty does. I remember one evening after the breakup, sitting in my car outside a grocery store longer than necessary. Nothing dramatic had happened that day, but I'd seen something inside, a brand of tea she used to buy, and instinctively reached for my phone. The motion happened automatically, then stopped halfway. There was no confusion about why I couldn't text her, just a quiet realization that the reflex itself was fading. That scared me more than missing her, because it meant replacement wasn't about another person. It was about habit dissolving, about emotional pathways closing naturally once they're no longer used. I sat there thinking how strange it was that someone could once be the first person you thought of, and later not appear at all. Not out of anger, not avoidance, just absence. I started noticing couples differently after that. Not in a judgmental way, just observational. At restaurants, I'd watch people interrupt each other mid-story. One person remembering something and immediately leaning in to share it. Those tiny moments stood out now. Because interruption means urgency. It means you need to know this right now. I realized that urgency had quietly disappeared between us long before we admitted anything was wrong. We became patient with each other. Too patient. Nothing needed to be shared immediately anymore. And when immediacy disappears, connection starts spacing itself out. For a while, I wondered if this happens to everyone eventually. If familiarity always replaces curiosity. If all long relationships slowly transition into calm coexistence. I still don't know the answer, but I do know this. Near the end, I stopped wondering what she was thinking when she got quiet. And she stopped asking what was on my mind too. Silence became self-contained instead of shared. We respected each other's inner worlds so much that we stopped entering them. At the time, that felt mature. Now I think it was distance wearing the disguise of stability. Months passed before I noticed something changing in me. I started talking more again. Not intentionally, just small things. Calling a friend to mention something insignificant. Sending messages without rehearsing whether they were worth sharing. The instinct to include someone slowly returned. And with it came an uncomfortable realization. I hadn't lost the ability to connect. I had adapted to not being met halfway. That adjustment had felt normal while it was happening. Only afterward did I recognize how quiet I'd become. Sometimes I think about how neither of us failed. That still feels important. There was no cruelty, no betrayal. We didn't stop caring overnight. We just stopped being each other's first thought. And once that happens, everything else follows naturally. Plans separate. Attention shifts. Life reorganizes. Not violently. Almost gently. I saw her again once, nearly a year later. Completely by accident. We talked easily. Asked polite questions. Laughed in familiar ways. There was warmth, but no pull. And during that conversation, something became clear in a way it hadn't before. I didn't wonder what she'd tell me later about this encounter, because I knew I wouldn't be part of her afterward anymore. And strangely, that felt okay. Not sad. Just accurate. We had moved fully into memory for each other. These days, when someone tells me something small, something unnecessary, I notice it differently. A random complaint. A passing thought. An unfinished idea. I understand what's being offered. Trust. Attention. Inclusion. Those things look insignificant from the outside. But they're where closeness actually lives. Not anniversaries. Not declarations. Just the instinct to share before thinking twice. I don't think about her with regret now. Mostly gratitude. She taught me how quiet distance can be. How relationships rarely end at dramatic moments. They end when small things stop traveling between two people. When thoughts find new destinations. When interruption disappears. And neither person notices immediately. Sometimes, late at night, I still catch myself forming sentences meant for someone else. Observations with no audience yet. And instead of feeling lonely, I feel aware. Because now I recognize what that impulse means. It means connection is possible again. It means part of me still wants to include someone in ordinary moments. And maybe that's enough. Not permanence. Not certainty. Just the willingness to keep telling small things while they still feel alive. Until one day someone listens. And answers. And the interruptions begin again. Quietly. Naturally. The way they once did. I think the strangest part is realizing that nothing dramatic ever replaces intimacy. It's never one big moment. It's accumulation. Or maybe subtraction. I'm still not sure which word fits better. Because when I look back now, I don't remember us becoming distant. I remember us becoming efficient. And efficiency feels responsible. Adult. Healthy, even. We stopped calling during the day unless something needed coordination. Stopped sending photos of random things. Stopped narrating moments as they happened. At the time, it felt respectful, like giving each other space, like trust. But space expands quietly if no one steps back into it. And eventually, you realize you're living separate days that only briefly overlap at night. I remember coming home once and finding her already asleep on the couch. Laptop open. A show paused mid-scene. I covered her with a blanket automatically. That part hadn't changed. Care was still there. Routine kindness. But instead of sitting beside her like I used to, I went into the kitchen and ate alone. Not intentionally, just because it felt easier. And later, lying in bed, I realized something uncomfortable. I hadn't wondered what she had been doing before falling asleep. I hadn't felt curious. That thought stayed with me longer than it should have. Because curiosity used to be automatic. I used to want the details. Now I accepted summaries. And eventually, even summaries stopped coming. There's a moment relationships cross that no one talks about. It's when you stop imagining telling the other person things later. Not consciously. You just don't store experiences for them anymore. I think that's when emotional separation actually begins. Before arguments. Before conversations about distance. Before anyone says we need to talk. You stop mentally including them in your future sentences. And life becomes internally narrated again. After she moved out, evenings felt different in a way I struggled to explain. Not emptier. More uninterrupted. I noticed how long my thoughts went without external reference. Hours passing without imagining someone else's reaction. At first it felt peaceful, then unfamiliar. Because for years, part of my thinking had been relational. Would she find this funny? Should I tell her this later? She'd probably have an opinion about this. Those silent questions disappeared slowly. And with them, the version of me shaped around sharing. I didn't realize how much identity forms around being witnessed. One night, months later, I caught myself laughing alone at something online. Real laughter. Instinctively, I turned my head slightly, the way you do when someone is beside you. No one was there. The movement happened before awareness. And instead of sadness, I felt recognition. That reflex had survived longer than the relationship itself. It faded eventually too. Not painfully, just naturally. Like muscle memory dissolving. I think people imagine replacement as sudden. Someone new appearing. A clear transition. But what actually happens is quieter. Attention reallocates. Time redistributes. Emotional energy finds new directions. No one consciously decides. You matter less now. They simply start living days that function without you. And eventually those days connect into a life. The same thing happened to me. I didn't replace her. My life just expanded around her absence until it felt normal again. That realization used to unsettle me. Now it feels honest. Sometimes I wonder if closeness always contains an expiration we can't see. Not because love fails, because attention requires renewal. And humans drift toward familiarity faster than they realize. Comfort tells you everything is safe. So you stop checking in. Stop asking. Stop wondering. Until one day there's nothing left to rediscover. I've noticed something about myself now when I meet someone new. I listen differently. Not for chemistry. Not for excitement. For curiosity. Do we interrupt each other naturally? Do conversations stretch past necessity? Do small details come back later? Because that's the early signal. Not attraction. Attention. Attention is what keeps people central in each other's lives. Without it, affection survives briefly. Then habit takes over. Then distance arrives quietly behind it. I don't blame us anymore. That took time. For a while, I kept searching for the mistake. Something we missed. Something fixable. But the truth is harder and simpler. Nothing broke. We just stopped choosing awareness consistently. And once awareness fades, closeness follows. Not dramatically, almost politely. Some nights, when the apartment is completely quiet, I think about how ordinary our ending was. No raised voices. No irreversible damage. Just two people gradually becoming witnesses to separate lives. And maybe that's why it took so long to understand. There was nothing to resist. Nothing to fight against. Only acceptance arriving slowly. I don't feel replaceable anymore in the way I once feared. Because replacement implies competition. And this was never about being better or worse. It was about presence. About whether two people continue turning toward each other. When that stops, separation isn't failure. It's momentum. Life continuing forward. Now, when someone tells me something small, something unfinished or unnecessary. I recognize the intimacy in it immediately. A complaint about traffic, a half-formed thought, a story that goes nowhere. Those things used to feel insignificant. Now they feel like invitations. Because small things are where connection lives longest. Not declarations, not milestones, just the instinct to share before filtering. I still don't know exactly when she stopped telling me small things first, or when I stopped asking. Maybe both happened at the same time. Maybe relationships don't end when love disappears. Maybe they end when everyday thoughts stop traveling between two people, when silence becomes easier than interruption, when internal life stops reaching outward, and everything continues, quietly, normally, almost perfectly fine, until one day you realize the story you used to tell together is being told separately now, and there's no clear moment to mourn, only understanding, arriving late, softly, like most important things do.